What if your loved ones vanished on an ordinary hiking trip? And for 2 years, the forest kept their secret. October 15th, 2021. A mother and her teenage son parked their Honda Civic at the Pine Ridge trailhead in the heart of the Adirondack Mountains. Security cameras capture them walking toward the forest entrance at 9:47 a.m., backpacks slung over their shoulders, water bottles in hand. The mother adjusts her son's jacket one last time before they disappear into the tree line. They were supposed to return by sunset. They never did. For 731 days, the wilderness held its silence. Search teams scoured every trail, every ravine, and every hidden corner of those unforgiving mountains. Nothing. No footprints. No belongings. No trace that Elena Mitchell and her 16-year-old son Dylan had ever existed. But the forest was keeping a secret. A secret so haunting that when it finally surfaced, it would leave investigators questioning everything they thought they knew about that October day. No one could have imagined that 2 years later, the truth would come to light through the most unlikely of discoveries. A hunter's dog, following an instinct older than civilization itself, would uncover what hundreds of trained searchers had missed. What happened in those woods defies explanation. What that dog found challenges everything we understand about survival, about hope, and about the thin line between life and death in the wilderness. Elena Mitchell was the kind of mother who would move mountains for her child. At 42, she worked double shifts as a registered nurse at Albany Medical Center, her hands healing strangers while her heart remained wholly devoted to one person, Dylan. Life hadn't been easy for Elena. Divorced 3 years earlier, she'd fought tooth and nail for custody of Dylan, not because his father was unfit, but because she couldn't bear the thought of spending even half her time away from the boy who'd given her life meaning. Her ex-husband had remarried and moved to California, leaving Elena and Dylan to build their own world together. Dylan Mitchell was everything a mother could hope for in a son. 16 years old, with his mother's determined spirit and an infectious laugh that could light up the darkest room. He played violin in the school orchestra and harbored dreams of becoming a veterinarian. His bedroom walls were covered with pictures of rescued animals, and he volunteered weekends at the local animal shelter. But Dylan had been struggling. The divorce had hit him harder than Elena realized. His grades were slipping. He'd quit the track team, and she'd noticed him staring out his bedroom window for hours, lost in thoughts too heavy for someone his age. That's why Elena suggested the hiking trip. "Just you and me, buddy," she told him over breakfast that Friday morning. "Like when you were little. Remember how we used to pretend we were explorers?" Dylan had smiled. The first real smile she'd seen in weeks. "Can we take the camera? Maybe we'll see a bear." Elena's sister later recalled feeling uneasy when Elena called that morning. There was something in her voice, Victoria would tell investigators. She sounded desperate, like this trip wasn't just about hiking, like she was trying to save something. What Elena didn't know was that Dylan had been researching something online. His browser history, discovered weeks later, showed searches for remote hiking trails, places where people disappear, and most chilling of all, how long can someone survive in the wilderness? But little did anyone know, this wasn't going to be just a mother-son bonding trip. Something was drawing them to those specific woods, something that would change their story from a weekend adventure into a mystery that would haunt everyone who knew them. The Adirondack Park stretches across 6 million acres of New York wilderness, larger than Vermont, Maine, and New Hampshire combined. Within its boundaries lie over 3,000 lakes, 30,000 miles of rivers and streams, and mountain peaks that have witnessed centuries of human struggle against nature's indifference. But the Adirondacks keep secrets. Local search and rescue teams know the statistics by heart. Every year, dozens of hikers vanish into these woods. Most are found within 48 hours, dehydrated and embarrassed. Some are discovered weeks later, victims of exposure or falls. Others simply disappear, their fate left to speculation and the slow accumulation of missing person files in dusty filing cabinets. The Pine Ridge Trail, where Elena and Dylan began their journey, winds through some of the park's most deceptive terrain. What appears to be a gentle path through towering pines quickly becomes a maze of unmarked game trails, sudden drop-offs, and dense thickets that can swallow a person whole. Weather in the Adirondacks is merciless and unpredictable. October temperatures can plummet from 70 degrees to below freezing in a matter of hours. Fog rolls in without warning, transforming familiar landscapes into alien territory where even experienced guides lose their bearings. The old-timers in nearby Tupper Lake speak in hushed tones about the woods. The forest chooses who comes back, 89-year-old retired Ranger Bill McPherson would later tell reporters. I've seen experienced hunters walk into those woods and come out changed men. Some don't come out at all. Native American folklore speaks of places where the barrier between worlds grows thin, where the earth itself seems to shift and change. The Mohawk word for the region translates roughly to place where spirits walk, and local tribes avoided certain areas during specific seasons, believing them to be portals to darker realms. Park rangers don't discuss the disappearances publicly, but their incident reports tell a different story. Over the past decade, search teams have logged over 200 cases of missing hikers in the Pine Ridge area alone. Most are resolved quickly, but 23 remain open files. People who entered the woods and simply vanished. What makes these disappearances especially disturbing is the pattern. Experienced hikers with GPS devices and emergency beacons. Families who know the trails like their own neighborhoods. People who should have been able to find their way out, even in the worst conditions. But for Elena and Dylan Mitchell, the forest was about to become something far darker than they could have ever imagined. October 15th started like any other autumn day in the Adirondacks. Elena and Dylan left their Albany apartment at 7 a.m., stopping for coffee and trail mix at a gas station in Glens Falls. The surveillance footage shows them laughing over something on Dylan's phone, the easy companionship of a mother and son who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. They arrived at the Pine Ridge Trailhead parking area at 9:30 a.m. The lot was nearly empty, just two other cars belonging to early morning hikers who had already set out. Elena signed the trail register, noting their planned return time as 6 p.m. and their intended destination as Hemlock Ridge, a moderate 8-mile round-trip hike with spectacular views of Lake Placid. Trail cameras positioned along the first mile of the path captured their progress. 9:47 a.m., Elena and Dylan walking side by side, pointing at something in the trees. 10:15 a.m., Dylan taking a selfie with his mother against a backdrop of golden maple leaves. 10:22 a.m., the last image, Elena consulting a map while Dylan crouches beside what appears to be animal tracks in the soft earth. After that, nothing. When 6 p.m. came and went without their return, the parking lot attendant made note of their abandoned Honda Civic. By 8 p.m., as darkness fell over the mountains, he called the state police. Elena's sister Victoria received the call at 9:30 p.m. I knew immediately something was wrong, she would later recall. Elena was obsessively punctual. She'd never worry me like that, never failed to check in. My heart stopped when I heard her car was still in the parking lot. The first search teams arrived at dawn on October 16th. Park rangers, accompanied by search dogs, began following the Pine Ridge Trail. They found evidence of Elena and Dylan's passage, a candy wrapper that Dylan had apparently dropped, a water bottle cap that Elena had lost, but the trail went cold at mile marker 4.7. What searchers discovered there defied explanation. The trail simply seemed to end. Not because it was blocked or washed out, but because all traces of the mother and son's passage vanished at that exact spot. The search dogs, trained to follow human scent for miles, began acting strangely. They whined, paced in circles, and refused to continue forward. I've been doing this for 30 years, lead search coordinator Captain Janet Morrison later told reporters. I've never seen anything like it. It's as if they just evaporated. The search expanded rapidly. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras swept the canopy. Drones equipped with high-resolution cameras photographed every inch of the surrounding terrain. Volunteers from 3 counties formed human chains, combing through underbrush and ravines. For 6 days, the mountains echoed with the sound of helicopters, the bark of search dogs, and the voices of hundreds of volunteers calling Elena and Dylan's names. Local news stations broadcast their pictures every hour. Social media campaigns spread their faces across the internet. And then, silence. No footprints. No gear. No bodies. It was as if Elena and Dylan Rodriguez had simply walked into thin air, leaving behind only questions and the growing horror that the forest had claimed 2 more victims. But there was one detail investigators found odd, something that didn't quite add up and would haunt the case for the next 2 years. By day 3 of the search, Pine Ridge had become the epicenter of the largest missing persons operation in Adirondack Park history. The parking lot, once peaceful and empty, now resembled a military command post, filled with emergency vehicles, media trucks, and the controlled chaos of a major rescue operation. Captain Janet Morrison had seen her share of missing hikers, but nothing had prepared her for the scale of this search. Word spread like wildfire, she recalled months later. We had volunteers driving from as far away as Vermont and Massachusetts. People who had never met Elena and Dylan, but felt compelled to help. The search teams operated in carefully coordinated grids, each square mile meticulously documented and explored. Thermal imaging helicopters flew predetermined patterns, their heat-sensing cameras capable of detecting body warmth through dense canopy. Ground teams moved in parallel lines, maintaining visual contact, leaving no stone unturned. Victoria Mitchell became the unofficial spokesperson for the family, her face a fixture on local news broadcasts. "My sister is a fighter," she told Channel 13 News on day 4. "And Dylan, that boy has more determination than most adults. If anyone could survive out there, it's them. We're not giving up." The community response was extraordinary. Local restaurants donated food for search teams. Hotels provided free rooms for out-of-state volunteers. A local print shop created thousands of missing person flyers that soon covered every storefront, telephone pole, and bulletin board within a 50-mile radius. Search dog handler Maria Santos brought her German Shepherd, Rex, from Connecticut specifically for this case. Rex had successfully located missing persons in 15 previous operations, his success rate nearly perfect. But in the Pine Ridge woods, Rex exhibited behavior Santos had never witnessed. He'd follow the scent trail to that same spot every time, Santos explained to investigators. Mile marker 4.7. And then he'd just stop. He'd whine, pace in circles, and refuse to go forward. I've never seen him act like that. It was like he was afraid of something. By day 7, the official search effort began to wind down. Search and rescue protocol dictates that after a week without contact, the likelihood of finding survivors drops to nearly 0. But the volunteers refused to quit. Dylan's classmates at Albany High School organized their own search parties every weekend. His violin teacher, Mrs. Patterson, led a group of faculty members who hiked different sections of the park each Saturday for months. The local animal shelter where Dylan volunteered posted his picture with a reward notice: $10,000 for information leading to the safe return of Dylan Mitchell, one of our most dedicated volunteers. Elena's colleagues at Albany Medical Center took vacation days to join search efforts. Head nurse Catherine Willis organized rotating teams that systematically covered every trail, every abandoned logging road, and every forgotten corner of the Adirondacks. Weather became a constant enemy. October in the mountains brought early frost, then November snow that made searching treacherous and potentially futile. Footprints, if there were any, would be buried. Bodies, if there were any, would be preserved until spring thaw. As winter deepened, the searches became more sporadic, but never stopped entirely. Christmas Day found a small group of volunteers hiking the Pine Ridge Trail, leaving battery-powered lanterns along the route in case Elena and Dylan were still alive, still trying to find their way home. But there was one detail investigators found troubling, something that emerged in the 3rd week of searching. Trail maintenance records showed that the Pine Ridge Trail had been updated just 2 weeks before Elena and Dylan's hike. New markers had been installed, and several old trail markers had been removed. The removed markers had created what park officials termed navigation confusion points, places where hikers following outdated maps might find themselves on unmarked paths leading deeper into wilderness areas. Could this simple, bureaucratic oversight have sealed Elena and Dylan's fate? As the one-year anniversary approached, the official case was reclassified from rescue to recovery. But hope refused to die. As months turned to seasons without answers, theories began to multiply like shadows in the forest. Each hypothesis seemed plausible until examined closely, then crumbled like leaves underfoot, leaving investigators and family members grasping at increasingly desperate possibilities. Theory 1. The accident scenario. This was the most logical explanation, the one that kept investigators awake at night precisely because it made so much sense. Elena and Dylan had somehow left the marked trail, perhaps chasing wildlife for a photo, or seeking privacy for a bathroom break, and become disoriented. In dense forest, it's possible to become lost within yards of a clear path. The timeline supported this theory. October weather in the Adirondacks is notoriously unpredictable. That afternoon had brought sudden temperature drops and an unexpected fog bank that rolled in around 3 p.m. Hypothermia could have set in rapidly, clouding judgment and making even simple navigation impossible. But this theory had fatal flaws. Search teams had covered a 20-mile radius around the trail. Thermal imaging had detected every deer, every bear, and every small woodland creature in the area. How could two human bodies simply vanish without a trace? Theory 2. Wildlife encounter. The Adirondacks are home to black bears, and October is feeding season before hibernation. A startled bear protecting cubs could potentially attack hikers. Mountain lions, though rare, have been spotted in the region. Park Ranger Tom Hendricks investigated this possibility extensively. "We found no signs of predator activity," he reported. "No blood, no torn clothing, no disturbed ground that would indicate a struggle. And predators don't typically consume entire bodies without leaving remains." More disturbing was the behavior of wildlife in the area following the disappearance. Trail cameras captured footage of deer and smaller animals avoiding the section of trail where Elena and Dylan had last been tracked. "Animals sense things we don't," noted wildlife biologist Dr. Rebecca Martinez. Their avoidance behavior suggested something had fundamentally changed in that ecosystem. Theory 3. Foul play. This was the theory that Victoria Mitchell couldn't shake, despite its complications. "My sister was a beautiful woman," she told investigators repeatedly. "She was alone in the woods with her teenage son. There are predators in those woods, but not all of them have 4 legs." The foul play theory gained traction when investigators discovered that 3 registered sex offenders lived within 30 miles of the Pine Ridge trailhead. All 3 were questioned extensively and provided alibis, but the possibility lingered like smoke in the air. More troubling was the discovery of illegal hunting camps in the deeper wilderness areas. These camps, some sophisticated enough to support long-term occupation, were used by hunters who operated outside state regulations. Could Elena and Dylan have stumbled upon illegal activities? Could they have been eliminated as witnesses? But again, the evidence didn't support the theory. No tire tracks led from remote logging roads toward the area where the pair disappeared. No other hikers reported seeing suspicious individuals that day. Theory 4. Voluntary disappearance. This was the theory that Elena's family found most offensive, but investigators couldn't ignore the possibility. Elena had been struggling financially since her divorce. Dylan was showing signs of depression. Could they have staged their own disappearance? The theory had some circumstantial support. Elena had withdrawn $500 in cash 2 days before the hike, unusual for someone who typically used credit cards. Dylan had been researching wilderness survival techniques online, and there was the disturbing detail of his browser searches for remote locations and disappearance stories. But the logistics made no sense. How could a nurse and her teenage son establish new identities? Where could they hide that wouldn't require social security numbers, employment records, or school enrollment? And most damning of all, how could they have escaped the forest without being detected by the massive search operation? Each theory seemed to contain a kernel of truth and a fatal flaw. As the first anniversary of their disappearance approached, investigators were no closer to answers than they had been on day one. But there was something else, something that would only emerge much later. Dylan's internet searches hadn't been random. In the weeks before their disappearance, he had been specifically researching the Pine Ridge area. Not just hiking information, but historical data about disappearances, local folklore, and something that chilled investigators when they finally discovered it: detailed maps of caves and underground waterways in the region. Why had a 16-year-old boy been so interested in the hidden geography beneath the Adirondack Mountains? And why hadn't he shared this research with his mother? The answers to these questions lay buried deeper than anyone imagined, waiting for a hunter's dog to uncover secrets that would rewrite everything everyone thought they knew about that October day. October 12, 2023. 2 years and 3 days after Elena and Dylan Mitchell vanished into the Adirondack wilderness. The leaves were turning again, painting the forest in the same golden palette that had witnessed their disappearance. Jake Morrison, no relation to search coordinator Captain Janet Morrison, had been hunting these woods for 37 years. At 54, he knew every deer trail, every natural blind, every secret the forest whispered to those patient enough to listen. This particular morning, he was tracking a 12-point buck whose prints he'd found near Beaver Pond, roughly 3 miles from the Pine Ridge Trail. Jake wasn't alone. His German short-haired pointer, Duke, had been his hunting companion for 8 seasons. Duke possessed the kind of instincts that couldn't be trained, an almost supernatural ability to sense things that escaped human perception. That dog could smell a deer from 2 counties away. Jake would later joke, though that morning he wasn't laughing. They were following a game trail that paralleled Pine Ridge when Duke suddenly stopped. Not the focused alertness of a dog detecting game, but something different. Something that made the hair on Jake's arm stand up. Duke began to whine, a high, anxious sound Jake had never heard from his normally confident companion. The dog's ears flattened against his head, and he began to pace in tight circles, his attention fixed on a section of forest that looked no different from any other. "What is it, boy?" Jake whispered, following protocol for not spooking game. But Duke's behavior wasn't indicating the presence of deer or bear. This was something else entirely. The area where Duke had stopped was unremarkable, a slight depression in the forest floor, overgrown with ferns and covered by 2 years of fallen leaves. No visible trail led to it. No reason for a hunting dog to show interest in what appeared to be empty woodland. But Duke wouldn't move. He stood rigid, trembling slightly, his nose pointed toward the ground with the intensity of a compass needle finding true north. When Jay tried to encourage him to continue tracking the buck, Duke planted his feet and refused to budge. That's when Jake noticed the smell. It was subtle, masked by the rich organic scents of autumn decay and wet earth. But there was something underneath, something that made his stomach tighten with recognition. In his years of hunting, Jake had encountered death in many forms. This smell was familiar and wrong at the same time. Duke began to dig. Not the playful scratching of a dog burying a bone, but frantic, desperate excavation. His paws through dirt and leaves in all directions as he worked with an urgency that seemed to come from something deeper than canine curiosity. "Duke, stop," Jake commanded, but his voice lacked conviction. Something about the scene felt significant, important in a way he couldn't articulate. He found himself kneeling beside his dog, pushing away the accumulated debris of 2 autumns. What they uncovered first was fabric, a small piece of blue nylon that hadn't yet succumbed to decomposition. Jake's heart began to race as he recognized what he was looking at, the corner of a backpack. His hands shaking, Jake carefully cleared more leaves and soil. The backpack was partially buried, as if covered deliberately or perhaps by a mudslide. But there was more. Duke had stopped digging and was staring at Jake with an expression that seemed almost human, a look that said, "I found what you didn't know you were looking for." Jake pulled out his cell phone to call authorities, but hesitated. He was in a dead zone, no signal available. The nearest ranger station was 4 miles away. He looked at Duke, who was now sitting calmly beside their discovery, his anxiety replaced by the satisfaction of a job completed. As Jake prepared to hike out for help, he made one more disturbing discovery. The backpack wasn't alone in its makeshift grave. Partially visible beneath layers of forest debris, he could make out what appeared to be additional fabric, different colors, different textures. And then, what no amount of hunting experience had prepared him for, the unmistakable curve of human bone. Jake Morrison and his dog had found Elena and Dylan Mitchell. But what they discovered would raise more questions than it answered, and the truth they were about to uncover would be more disturbing than anyone had imagined. The call came in to the Franklin County Sheriff's Department at 2:47 p.m. on October 12, 2023. Jake Morrison, his voice tight with controlled shock, reported finding possible human remains in the Pine Ridge area. Within 40 minutes, the forest was once again filled with official vehicles, but this time the urgency carried a different weight. Not the desperate hope of rescue, but the grim certainty of recovery. Detective Lisa Kowalski had worked the Mitchell case from the beginning. She'd interviewed the family, coordinated with search teams, and spent countless hours studying maps and evidence reports. As she hiked toward Jake's GPS coordinates, her mind raced through possibilities, but nothing prepared her for what Duke had uncovered. The scene that greeted investigators defied easy explanation. Elena and Dylan hadn't simply become lost and succumbed to exposure. Their remains were buried in what appeared to be a deliberate concealment, a shallow depression that had been covered with branches, leaves, and deliberately placed stones. But the positioning of the bodies told a story more complex than simple foul play. Elena's remains were arranged in what forensic anthropologist Dr. Amanda Torres later described as protective positioning, her arms wrapped around Dylan, her body curled to shield him from elements. Even in death, the mother's instinct to protect her son was evident. This wasn't a crime scene in the traditional sense, Dr. Torres explained to investigators. The positioning suggests Elena arranged herself and her son this way. But why were they buried? And by whom? The backpack Jake had first spotted belonged to Dylan. Inside, investigators found his camera, a waterproof digital model that had somehow survived 2 years in the ground. When the memory card was extracted and processed, it contained 63 photos that would rewrite the entire case. The photos told a story of the hike that matched witness accounts and trail camera footage for the first several miles. Elena and Dylan smiling, pointing out wildlife, enjoying their mother-son adventure. But the final 12 photos, taken between 2:30 and 4:15 p.m. on October 15, 2021, revealed something extraordinary. Photo 52, Dylan pointing excitedly at what appeared to be a cave opening, partially hidden behind fallen logs and overgrown vegetation. The timestamp showed 2:31 p.m. Photos 53 to 58, interior shots of a cave system, taken with camera flash. Limestone formations, underground pools of water, narrow passages leading deeper into darkness. Dylan had apparently convinced his mother to explore. Photo 59, Elena looking concerned, her hand on Dylan's shoulder as if urging caution. Behind them, the cave opening they had entered was no longer visible. Photos 60 to 62, increasingly desperate images of dead-end passages. Elena and Dylan, both visible in selfie-style shots, their faces showing growing alarm. Photo 63, the final image, timestamped 4:15 p.m., was the most heartbreaking. Elena holding Dylan close, both their faces streaked with tears, the camera flash illuminating rough stone walls that seemed to press in from all sides. The cave system Dylan had discovered wasn't on any official park maps. Geological surveys later revealed it was part of an extensive limestone cave network that honeycombed the underground geology of the region. The entrance the Mitchell family had used was unstable. Investigation revealed it had collapsed sometime during the winter of 2021 to 2022, sealing whatever lay beyond. But this discovery raised more questions than it answered. How had Elena and Dylan escaped the cave system to die above ground? Who had buried them? And why had their remains been arranged with such obvious care? The answer came from an unexpected source: Elena's nursing background and the items found in her backpack. Among Elena's possessions, investigators discovered a small notebook containing detailed observations about their underground ordeal. Her medical training had compelled her to document their situation with clinical precision. Day 1. Found cave entrance 2:30 p.m. Dylan excited about exploration. Entered system approximate 2:45 p.m. Lost sight of entrance within 30 minutes. No cell service. Temperature approximately 50 degrees. Day 2. Located underground water source. Dylan showing signs of hypothermia. Using body heat to keep warm. Explored 3 passages. All dead ends. Day 3. Dylan developing respiratory symptoms. Cave air poor quality. Must find exit soon. The final entry, written in increasingly shaky handwriting, was dated Day 7. Dylan very weak. Found partial cave-in blocking main passage. Can see daylight through gap too small to exit. If anyone finds this, we tried so hard to get home. Dr. Torres's forensic analysis revealed that Elena and Dylan had survived underground for at least a week, possibly longer. Cause of death was exposure and dehydration, but they had died above ground, not in the cave system. The mystery deepened when investigators discovered that the burial site was located directly above the cave system where the Mitchell family had been trapped. Someone, or something, had moved their bodies from the underground chambers to the surface and arranged them with obvious reverence and care. Who had found Elena and Dylan? Who had given them this final dignity? And why had their benefactor never come forward, even during the massive search operation? The answer would challenge everything investigators thought they knew about wilderness survival, human compassion, and the thin line between civilization and the wild places that still exist in our world. The breakthrough in understanding what had really happened to Elena and Dylan Mitchell came from an unexpected source: a reclusive hermit named Thomas Bear McKinnon, who had lived in the Adirondack wilderness for over 25 years. McKinnon came forward 3 days after the discovery, his conscience finally overcoming his instinct for isolation. At 68 years old, he had been living completely off-grid in a series of hidden shelters throughout the Pine Ridge area, surviving through hunting, fishing, and an intimate knowledge of the forest that bordered on the supernatural. I found them in February, McKinnon told Detective Kowalski in his first interaction with law enforcement in decades. Snow had melted enough to reveal the cave opening, different from where they'd gone in. They'd been trying to dig their way out when they died. McKinnon's account filled in the final pieces of the puzzle. Elena and Dylan had indeed survived underground for over a week, slowly working their way through the cave system in search of an exit. They had managed to break through to a secondary entrance, but exposure and exhaustion had claimed them within sight of freedom. The woman, Elena, she kept that boy alive for days longer than should have been possible, McKinnon explained, his voice thick with emotion. Even at the end, she was covering him with her jacket, trying to keep him warm. Most beautiful thing and most heartbreaking thing I ever saw. McKinnon had discovered their bodies in late February 2022, 4 months after their disappearance. But his decision not to immediately contact authorities stemmed from a complex mix of paranoia, past trauma, and a hermit's distrust of civilization. "I'd been living out there to get away from people," he said. "Had my reasons. But seeing that mother and son, I couldn't just leave them there. Couldn't let the animals get to them. So I buried them proper, said some words, tried to give them peace." McKinnon's burial ritual had been performed with genuine reverence. He had wrapped the bodies in tarps from his shelter, arranged them in the protective position investigators had found, and covered them with stones to protect them from scavengers. He had even carved a small wooden cross, which investigators found buried beneath 2 years of leaf litter. "I kept thinking I should call someone," McKinnon admitted, "but I was afraid. Afraid they'd blame me, afraid they'd think I'd hurt them. By the time I worked up the courage, the searches had stopped. Figured it wouldn't bring them back anyway." The revelation of McKinnon's actions added a layer of profound humanity to the tragedy. Here was a man who had abandoned society, yet when confronted with the ultimate expression of human love, a mother protecting her child even in death, He had been moved to honor that love with dignity and respect. Victoria Mitchell's reaction to learning the truth was complex. "I'm angry that this man didn't come forward sooner," she told reporters outside the courthouse. "We spent 2 years not knowing, 2 years of hope and agony. But I'm also grateful. Grateful that someone cared enough to treat my sister and nephew with dignity when they couldn't care for themselves." The cave system where Elena and Dylan died was permanently sealed by park authorities, both to prevent future tragedies and to serve as their final resting place. A small memorial marker now stands at the Pine Ridge trailhead, bearing their names and a simple inscription: "Beloved mother and son, their love transcended even death." But the Mitchell family story had a final chapter that would resonate far beyond their personal tragedy. In Dylan's backpack, investigators found a sealed letter addressed to my mom. Written sometime during their underground ordeal, it read, "Mom, I know this is scary and I know we might not make it out, but I want you to know that these have been the best days of my life. Not because we're trapped, but because it's just you and me, and I finally understand how much you love me. I'm sorry I've been difficult lately. I'm sorry I made you worry. If we don't get out of here, I need you to know that you are the best mom anyone could have. I love you more than all the stars in the sky, which we can't see right now, but I know they're still there. Just like my love for you will always be there, even if I'm not." The letter was dated 3 days before their deaths, proof that even as their situation grew desperate, the bond between mother and son had only grown stronger. Elena's final journal entry, discovered tucked into her jacket pocket, was equally heart-wrenching. "Dylan has stopped talking about being scared. He's trying to be brave for me now, just like I've been trying to be brave for him. I've failed at many things in my life, but I will not fail at this. If we die here, we die together, and he will know until his last breath that he was loved completely, perfectly, and without condition. That has to be enough. That has to matter." The Mitchell family story became more than a missing persons case. It became a testament to the power of human love to transcend even the darkest circumstances. Their tragedy touched thousands of people who had never met them, but recognized in their story the universal bond between parent and child. 2 years later, the search and rescue protocols in the Adirondack Park have been updated to include ground-penetrating radar capable of detecting underground voids and cave systems. Trail maps now clearly mark known cave entrances and warn hikers of the dangers of underground exploration without proper equipment. But perhaps the most lasting impact of Elena and Dylan Mitchell's story is the reminder it provides about the fragility of life and the strength of love. They walked into the woods on an ordinary October day, seeking connection and healing. They found both in ways they never could have imagined. Their story asks us to consider what truly matters when everything else is stripped away. In their final days, trapped underground with no hope of rescue, Elena and Dylan discovered that love is not diminished by desperate circumstances. It is refined, purified, made perfect. What would you have done if faced with such impossible choices? How would you have spent those final days with the person you loved most in the world? These are questions without easy answers. Questions that remind us that every ordinary day is precious. Every moment with our loved ones is a gift. The Adirondack Mountains keep many secrets, but the secret of Elena and Dylan Mitchell has finally been told. They walked into the woods and never came back. But their love story, born in darkness and sealed in stone, will endure as long as there are people who understand that the bond between parent and child is stronger than death itself. If this story moved you, if it reminded you to cherish the people you love, then Elena and Dylan Mitchell's final journey was not in vain. Thomas Bear McKinnon was never charged with any crime related to his delayed reporting of the discovery. Instead, he was quietly connected with social services and mental health support, helping him transition back into society after 25 years of isolation. He now works with park rangers, using his intimate knowledge of the wilderness to help prevent future tragedies. The hunter Jake Morrison and his dog Duke were recognized by the state for their role in finally bringing closure to the Mitchell family. Duke received a special commendation, the the first time in New York State history that a hunting dog was officially recognized for contributing to a missing persons case. But the most profound impact of this story isn't found in official recognitions or policy changes. It's found in the thousands of families who heard about Elena and Dylan Mitchell and decided to put down their phones, turn off their televisions, and simply spend time together. It's found in the parents who hug their children a little tighter, and the children who call their mothers just to say, "I love you." The Pine Ridge Trail remains open to hikers, but it's different now. People walk more quietly there, more thoughtfully. Many leave small tokens at the memorial marker: flowers, stones, handwritten notes. The trail has become a place of pilgrimage for those who understand that love is the only thing that truly survives when everything else falls away. Elena and Dylan Mitchell walked into the Adirondack wilderness seeking healing and found something even more precious. They discovered that their love for each other was strong enough to transform tragedy into testament, despair into devotion, and death into an eternal reminder that we are only as alone as we choose to be. Their story continues to unfold in every family that chooses connection over convenience, in every parent who listens instead of lectures, in every child who reaches out instead of withdrawing. The forest may have claimed their bodies, but their spirit lives on in the simple truth they proved with their final breaths. Love endures. Love transcends. Love is the only light we need when darkness falls. What do you think really happened in those final days underground? What would you have done in Elena's position? How would you want to be remembered if faced with impossible circumstances? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're worth asking. They're worth discussing. They're worth remembering every time we take for granted the people we love most in this world. The Adirondack Mountains will keep their remaining secrets, but the secret of Elena and Dylan Mitchell, the secret of a love that conquered fear, transcended death, and continues to inspire 2 years later, belongs to all of us now. Their final gift to the world wasn't their survival. It was their example of how to love completely, even when hope is gone, even when the darkness seems absolute, even when tomorrow may never come. In the end, that may be the most important lesson any of us can learn from their tragic and beautiful story.